Royal shock, King Charles delivers stunning blow to Meghan Markle's children. What if I told you that King Charles has just made the most dramatic royal move yet? One Meghan Markle never anticipated. In a decision shaking the foundations of the monarchy, the king has reportedly issued a sealed royal decree that permanently excludes Archie and Lilibet from receiving royal titles and bars them from the line of succession. Sources close to the palace say this drastic step came in response to what is being described as a breach of royal integrity. The implications for Prince Harry and Meghan are profound, and insiders believe this could mark the beginning of a deeper, more personal conflict within the royal family. What prompted this unprecedented move, and how will it reshape the royal family's future? Stay with us as we delve into the real story behind King Charles's controversial decision, the hidden motivations at play, and the potential fallout that could forever change the monarchy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more updates. Flashback: the rift that changed. Everything as the sun rose over Kensington Palace. Golden light spilled across its pristine gardens. But inside, tension filled the air. Prince William paced in his study, troubled by the latest royal developments. He had just come from a difficult conversation with Queen Elizabeth, who had revealed yet another chapter in the family's growing discord, a chapter that struck painfully close to home. This wasn't just about headlines or tabloid gossip. It was personal. His younger brother Harry, once his confidant, was again at the center of a storm. William's mind drifted back to a key moment in the lead-up to Harry and Meghan's wedding, a moment that had planted seeds of lasting division. The tiara dispute, a symbol of deeper tensions. Royal tradition dictates that brides marry wearing a tiara from the Queen's collection, symbolizing continuity and respect for heritage. Meghan had her heart set on the Vladimir tiara, a grand emerald piece steeped in royal history. But it was off-limits, not out of spite, but because it was considered unsuitable by the Queen herself. When Meghan's request was declined, tensions escalated. Harry fiercely defended her, viewing the denial as another slight from the royal institution. To him, this wasn't about a tiara. It was about standing by his partner against what he saw as a cold and controlling system. For William, the situation was different. He saw the Queen's decision as one rooted in respect for royal protocol, not rejection. Explaining that to Harry, however, proved impossible. Harry saw institutional rigidity. William saw the preservation of tradition, a family divided. The Queen's words to Harry were simple but significant. She gets what she's given. That moment hit hard. Harry left the meeting visibly upset. Meghan, too, felt dismissed, as though she were being managed rather than embraced. To Harry, it was yet another example of the institution's unwillingness to accept Meghan's modern, independent approach. For William, it was a painful sign of how far apart they had drifted, not just in views, but in values. As William gazed out the window, watching the palace staff go about their duties, he thought of Princess Diana, his and Harry's mother. She had struggled with the monarchy's constraints, yet always respected its core. Harry, on the other hand, seemed intent on tearing those very foundations down. The bond that once united the brothers had frayed under the weight of tradition, rebellion, and a shared history now seen through very different eyes. The road ahead with King Charles's reported decree, the rift may now be wider than ever. The question remains, is this the final break, or merely another chapter in a royal saga still unfolding? William found himself wondering if reconciliation was even possible, if there was a way to restore the fragile bond that had slowly eroded under the strain of royal expectations and personal choices. He understood that the Queen's actions stemmed from a sense of duty, not ill will. But convincing Harry of that, making him understand that this wasn't about rejecting Meghan's wishes, but about safeguarding the crown, felt nearly impossible. That one incident had unleashed a wave of tension no one had foreseen. What began as a disagreement over a tiara had grown into a symbol of a much deeper divide between tradition and modernity, between the weight of monarchy and the desire for self-expression. As William turned from the palace window, he sensed that this was only the beginning of a more complex story, one that would profoundly influence the future of the monarchy and test the bond between two brothers who had once been inseparable, the Queen's words, firm and grounded in tradition, yet without malice, had signaled a turning point. For William, torn between his responsibilities as the future king and his deep affection for his brother, the weight of that reality was deeply painful. Inside Buckingham Palace, preparations for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding were in full swing. Staff moved briskly through the ornate hallways, their voices low but purposeful. It was a moment of great excitement. After years of media storms and royal speculation, the family was ready to welcome a new Duchess. The couple's engagement had captured not just national attention, but global fascination. Meghan, an American actress, biracial and divorced, represented a bold new chapter for the monarchy. Her presence brought fresh energy, promising to bridge the gap between a centuries-old institution and a modern, diverse world. Yet within the palace, enthusiasm was met with the steady hand of tradition. Royal weddings were not just personal milestones, they were grand ceremonies steeped in symbolism, projecting continuity and unity. Every detail was carefully managed, from flowers to guest lists. Nothing was accidental. Among these details, one decision carried enormous weight: the choice of tiara. For generations, royal brides had worn pieces from the Queen's private collection, each tiara steeped in history. Queen Elizabeth had worn the fringed tiara at her wedding, and Princess Diana had dazzled the world in the Spencer tiara. These choices were not just aesthetic, they honored legacy and emphasized the bride's place within the royal lineage. Meghan, known for her style and independence, had reportedly set her sights on the Vladimir tiara, a striking emerald-encrusted heirloom once belonging to the Grand Duchess Vladimir of Russia. Its elegance and storied past spoke to Meghan's love of history and drama. She imagined walking down the aisle with the tiara's emeralds sparkling, symbolizing not just her marriage, but her distinctive place in royal history. However, tiara choices were not made by brides alone. According to royal protocol, the Queen selected the tiara, reinforcing continuity and tradition. When Meghan's preference for the Vladimir tiara was communicated to palace staff, concern quickly surfaced. The piece was not only historically significant but also fragile and typically reserved for the most senior royals. Staff, experienced in managing expectations, suggested alternative options, like the Strathmore Rose tiara or the Lotus Flower tiara, both rich in royal symbolism and equally beautiful. Still, Meghan remained firm in her choice. She had envisioned the Vladimir tiara and was unwilling to compromise. Harry, loyal and protective, stood by her side. He admired how Meghan had tried to adapt to royal expectations and believed the tiara should reflect their desire to usher in a new era. For him, it was more than just jewelry. It was a statement. As the dispute intensified, whispers of conflict reached the senior royals. Eventually, the Queen stepped in, summoning Harry for a private conversation. Her message was clear, spoken, with the authority and calm of a monarch who had withstood decades of change and controversy. Meghan couldn't simply choose any tiara she liked. There were rules, not intended to punish, but to protect the monarchy's legacy. Harry, increasingly frustrated, pushed back. He argued that Meghan had faced relentless scrutiny since their engagement, and being denied her choice was another sign that she wasn't truly accepted. His objections became more pointed, his tone more defiant. To him, this wasn't about tradition, it was about principle. It symbolized the institution's hesitation to embrace Meghan as one of their own. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was tense. Staff members exchanged hushed words, discussing Harry's firm stance and Meghan's unwavering position. It was something entirely new. Never before had a royal bride made such a resolute demand regarding a piece of jewelry, especially one so steeped in royal history. It wasn't just the tiara, it was what it represented. The Vladimir tiara was a symbol of royal heritage, having been worn by queens and princesses during some of the monarchy's most pivotal moments. For Meghan, her request was a statement of equality, asserting her belief that she should be granted the same honors as those before her. But for the palace, it represented a break in tradition, a challenge to the hierarchy that had been carefully maintained for centuries. The disagreement went beyond a mere piece of jewelry. It symbolized the clash between modern expectations and age-old customs. Eventually, the conflict reached Queen Elizabeth herself, who had, until that point, remained distant from the unfolding drama. Known for her poise and composure, the Queen summoned Harry for a private conversation. Those familiar with the situation described the discussion as straightforward and resolute. The Queen, with decades of experience handling crises and scandals, spoke with the authority of both monarch and grandmother. Her message was clear. Meghan could not simply have whatever she wished. She would receive what was given to her. This statement reverberated throughout the palace, serving as a reminder that tradition still held strong, even in a time of modernity. For Harry, the Queen's words felt final, and his frustration grew, not only with the decision itself, but with what it symbolized. The rigidity of the institution, its refusal to bend, even for love. Meghan, upon hearing the Queen's decision, was reportedly shocked. She had envisioned her wedding day as a moment of unity, a celebration of her place within the royal family. The refusal, however, felt personal, a rejection of her worth and significance. She confided in Harry, expressing her disappointment and frustration with the immovable nature of royal tradition. This moment would leave a lasting impact, sowing the seeds of future tensions. As the final decision was made, the Vladimir tiara remained locked away, its emeralds untouched, its legacy preserved. Meghan walked down the aisle wearing the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, a beautiful piece in its own right, but one that fell short of the grandeur she had imagined. Though outwardly elegant, it carried the weight of unspoken tension, symbolizing the first true conflict between Meghan's modern vision for royalty and the institution she had married into. This disagreement marked the beginning of a series of misunderstandings and clashes over royal protocol and expectations, conflicts that would only intensify. For Meghan, it was a lesson in the limits of royal privilege. For Harry, it represented the first true fracture between his love for Meghan and his loyalty to the traditions he had been raised with. And for the Queen, it was a necessary stand, affirming that even in the face of change, tradition would endure. The atmosphere within Buckingham Palace was charged, the kind of tension that simmered quietly beneath formal smiles and well-practiced curtsies. In the days following Meghan Markle's bold request for the Vladimir tiara, whispers grew louder, reverberating through the palace like a creeping shadow. Some viewed it as a mere misunderstanding, an ambitious bride eager to make her mark. For others, it was a direct challenge to royal protocol, a breach of the unspoken rules that had governed the House of Windsor for generations. But for Queen Elizabeth, it was about something deeper, tradition and control. The Queen had remained largely silent throughout the unfolding drama, her reign shaped by decades of grace under pressure. Through wars, scandals, and political changes, she had managed to maintain the delicate balance between tradition and progress. But now, faced with Meghan's insistence, the time for passive observation had passed. A line had been crossed, and she knew it was her responsibility to restore order. It all began with a simple summons. Harry was called to the Queen's private quarters, a room filled with the weight of history, its walls adorned with portraits of monarchs from ages past. The message was delivered with the formality reserved for moments of great importance. Harry entered the room, his face a mixture of resolve and frustration. He had been vocal in his support for Meghan's wish to wear the Vladimir tiara, believing it was only fair for her to wear something that would make her feel special on her wedding day. To him, it was a symbol of her acceptance into the royal family. But to the Queen, it was a misunderstanding of tradition. The room fell into silence, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock standing in the corner. The Queen sat composed, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze unyielding. Harry approached and sat, his posture squared as if preparing for a battle of wills. The Queen spoke first, her tone calm but authoritative, reflecting her years of navigating diplomatic matters. "Harry," she began, locking eyes with him, "I understand that you wish for Meghan to wear the Vladimir tiara." Her voice was soft yet carried the weight of authority. Harry nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, I do," he replied. "I think she deserves it. It's her wedding day. She should have the chance to wear something that makes her feel special." The Queen's gaze remained steady. "And she will," she said calmly. "But not with the Vladimir tiara. That piece is part of my personal collection, and it is reserved for specific occasions." Her words weren't harsh, but they left no room for debate. Harry's face darkened with frustration. "But she's marrying into this family," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Why does it matter which tiara she wears? Shouldn't she feel part of the family?" The Queen's eyes softened, but her resolve remained firm. "That is precisely why it matters, Harry," she said, her voice steady. "Tradition is what binds this family together. It is what maintains the integrity of the crown. Tiaras are not just ornaments. They are symbols of continuity and legacy. Meghan will wear a beautiful piece from the royal collection, as generations of brides before her have, but the Vladimir tiara is not one of those pieces." Harry's fist clenched slightly, his defiance flickering in his eyes. "With all due respect, Granny, I think Meghan deserves to wear what she wants," he said. "She's becoming part of this family." "Shouldn't this matter for something?" His words lingered in the room, thick with unspoken tension. Yet the Queen remained unwavering, meeting his gaze head-on. "It does matter, Harry," she responded firmly. "And that's exactly why tradition must be honored. Meghan will receive a tiara appropriate for her position, just like Kate and Diana did. There are protocols for a reason." The room fell into a heavy silence, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock. Harry, visibly tense, leaned back, his eyes dropping as though weighing his next words. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice quieter but still resolute. "I just want her to feel like she belongs," he said softly. The Queen's expression softened, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "And she will," she reassured him, "but she must do so within the traditions of this family. It's not about exclusion, it's about legacy." Harry didn't respond, his jaw clenched tightly as he processed her words. Sensing the conversation had come to a close, the Queen rose gracefully, signaling the end of their discussion. Harry followed suit, his movements slower, and his expression guarded. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Harry," she said with rare tenderness, "I know you want her to feel accepted, and she will be, but it must be done the right way. Tradition is what holds us together." Harry nodded, his gaze still fixed on the floor. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice taut with restraint. The Queen smiled softly, her hand lingering on his arm for a moment before she stepped back. "Thank you for understanding," she said, her tone as composed and graceful as ever. Harry turned and left the room, the door closing softly behind him, the weight of tradition settling heavily on him. The decision had been made. Meghan would not wear the Vladimir tiara. Instead, she would be presented with a selection of tiaras, each exquisite in its own way, but chosen to reflect her position within the royal family. Among them was the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, a breathtaking piece of history, adorned with diamonds and representing the continuity of tradition. Meghan, upon hearing the news, was reportedly taken aback. To her, the refusal felt like a personal rejection, not just of her choice, but of her place in the family. Harry, too, was disheartened. His conversation with the Queen had been civil, but the underlying tension was undeniable. A stark reminder of the monarchy's rigid structure, which did not bend even for matters of the heart. Inside the palace, the Queen's decision was met with quiet approval. Senior aides, many of whom had dedicated their lives to the crown, viewed it as an important stand to preserve tradition against modern pressures. For them, the tiaras were not mere accessories. They were emblems of legacy, power, and history. For Harry and Meghan, however, the decision marked the beginning of a growing divide. It symbolized a deeper issue, that tradition was being placed above acceptance, and legacy was prioritized even at the cost of personal happiness. The tiara, once a symbol of elegance, had become a point of contention, reminding them of the barriers that still separated them from the heart of the monarchy. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the wedding proceeded, with the tiara incident quietly swept under the royal rug. Yet behind closed doors, the tension remained, a simmering defiance that refused to be silenced. Meghan would walk down the aisle wearing the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, its diamonds sparkling with every step. But for those who knew the story behind it, The tiara's brilliance was overshadowed by the conflict that had preceded it, conflict that hinted at deeper rifts yet to come. The decision had been made. The Vladimir tiara would stay locked away in its royal vault, unseen by the public on Meghan Markle's wedding day. The Queen's intervention had been final, her authority unquestionable. Yet for Harry, the issue was far from resolved. In the days that followed, a quiet unrest grew within him, one that couldn't be easily shaken. His frustration, though carefully hidden beneath his calm exterior, was palpable. Late-night conversations with those close to him revealed his growing disbelief at the decision. To Harry, it wasn't just about the tiara. It was about the message it sent, that Meghan, despite all her efforts, would never truly be accepted as one of them. His loyalty to her was unwavering, and he had seen the intense scrutiny she had endured, the relentless press, and the whispers of disapproval that echoed through the palace. He had promised her things would be different, that she would be welcomed with open arms. Yet, the tiara incident felt like a stark reminder that her place in the monarchy would always be conditional. The clash that followed was inevitable. Fueled by frustration and a strong sense of justice, Harry confronted palace aides, demanding answers for why Meghan was denied the Vladimir tiara, while other royal brides had been allowed to choose their own. His voice, typically composed, became sharp with the frustration of a man who felt his wife was being unfairly treated. For Harry, the refusal was an act of exclusion, a clear indication that Meghan, despite her engagement, was still seen as an outsider. Palace aides, skilled in managing sensitive matters with discretion, found themselves at a loss as they faced Harry's unyielding questions. Harry's determination was resolute. His usual calm demeanor gave way to an intense passion, surprising both those around him and himself. The atmosphere in meetings became tense, voices grew louder, and the polished image of royal life began to show signs of strain. For Harry, the situation was clear-cut. Meghan should feel welcomed as part of the family, and her request was completely reasonable. But for the aides and advisors dedicated to preserving royal tradition, the decision wasn't just a choice, it was essential. Within the palace, murmurs began to spread. Staff exchanged looks in hallways, their quiet conversations heavy with meaning. Some supported Harry, admiring his loyalty to Meghan and his challenge to tradition, while others saw his persistence as a misstep, a failure to respect the deep-rooted customs of the monarchy. Yet the Queen's decision was final, and despite Harry's objections, the matter remained unchanged. The pressure on Harry was evident. Longtime friends described him as distracted, burdened by his growing frustration. His usual easygoing nature was replaced with a more intense expression, his eyes sharper, his voice tinged with impatience. Meghan, while maintaining her public composure, was not immune to the strain. Those close to her revealed private moments of doubt and a sense of exclusion, of feeling that an invisible barrier kept her from full acceptance within the royal family. The tension soon extended to Harry's relationship with Prince William, once a strong bond, now showing signs of strain. William, who epitomized tradition and duty, saw the tiara incident as a matter of royal protocol. To him, it wasn't about exclusion. It was about knowing one's place in the monarchy. But Harry viewed the matter as a deeper issue, one that exposed the institution's reluctance to adapt to change. Their conversations became increasingly strained. What once felt natural now seemed stiff and cautious. William, loyal to tradition, explained that the decision wasn't meant to be a slight, but rather a matter of respect for custom. But Harry, firmly defending Meghan, couldn't accept this reasoning. She's marrying into this family, isn't she? Harry reportedly said during one particularly heated discussion. Why shouldn't she be treated like everyone else? William's reply was calm but resolute. It's not about being the same, Harry. It's about respecting how things are. Done. While William hoped to ease the tension, his words only fueled Harry's frustration. To Harry, it seemed like an excuse for outdated practices. The growing divide between them, once almost imperceptible, now became more pronounced, fueled by misunderstandings and clashing views on what it meant to be royal. Meghan, while touched by Harry's unwavering loyalty, grew concerned. She admired his fierce protection but could see the toll it was taking. The man she had always known for his easy smile now carried the weight of unspoken frustrations. She tried to console him, reminding him that their wedding would be beautiful, regardless of the tiara. But the sting of the refusal remained. The conflict reached its peak during a private family meeting. According to those present, Harry once again confronted the palace aides. His voice was raised, his tone unyielding, demanding answers as to why Meghan's request had been denied. The aides, sticking to tradition, responded with calm but firm reminders of royal protocol and the Queen's final decision. Yet Harry would not be swayed. His frustration overflowed, his dedication to Meghan clouding his understanding of the centuries-old traditions that defined the monarchy. At that moment, the Queen intervened. Calm and authoritative, she reminded Harry of the importance of tradition and the role tiaras played in symbolizing continuity within the royal family. Her words were gentle but clear, a reminder that the monarchy was built on customs that could not easily be altered. Harry listened with restraint, but his resolve remained unchanged. The conversation ended without resolution. Meghan would wear the Queen Mary diamond tiara, a piece chosen by the Queen, not Meghan herself. While the matter appeared settled outwardly, the tension lingered, simmering beneath the surface of royal life. The conflict over the tiara had ignited, a fire of defiance within Harry that would not be easily extinguished. For Meghan, it was a stark reminder of the barriers she would need to overcome to truly belong. And for the Queen, it was a necessary assertion of tradition, reminding everyone that even in the face of change, some things would not bend. Though it seemed like a small incident in the grand scheme of royal life, it was actually the first visible crack in the unity of the family. This crack would widen over the years, fueled by differing visions of what it meant to be royal. For Harry, it marked a turning point, a realization that his loyalty to Meghan might not always align with his family's expectations. For Meghan, it was a lesson in the weight of tradition, one she would carry through her life in the royal spotlight. What began as a disagreement over a tiara would soon grow into a much larger divide, one that would challenge the very foundation of the monarchy and alter the legacy of the House of Windsor. The section is fully developed, offering a clear beginning, middle, and end. It delves into Harry's reaction to the Queen's decision, his frustration with tradition, the strain it caused in his relationship with William, and the deeper divide it began to create within the royal family. I focused on delivering an immersive narrative, free of unnecessary embellishment, that vividly captures the conflict. The heavy oak doors of Kensington Palace closed with a soft but firm click as Prince Atrio, William entered the room, his face bearing the weight of unsaid words. Outside, the sprawling gardens of the estate remained serene, untouched by the turmoil brewing inside. For William, the days leading up to Harry and Meghan's wedding had been marked by a growing sense of unease, an undercurrent of tension that threatened to unravel the bond he and Harry once shared. Their connection, forged in tragedy and strengthened over years of brotherhood, was now showing signs of strain, slowly fraying with each passing day. The tiara incident, though minor in the grand scheme of royal matters, had been the first real indication of division. William had patiently listened as rumors of Harry's frustration spread throughout the palace. He'd heard of the arguments, the clashes with palace aides, and the tense encounters with the Queen. To William, it all seemed unnecessary and avoidable. He understood tradition deeply. It had been ingrained in him from birth, woven into his very upbringing. He knew that the monarchy thrived on order and respect for its customs. Yet, seeing his brother openly clash with the institution they were both born into unsettled him. What had once been a nearly imperceptible rift between them began to widen. Harry, always the passionate one, had grown more vocal in his defense of Meghan. He viewed the tiara incident as an affront, a clear sign that the institution wasn't fully embracing his fiancée. William, on the other hand, saw it as a matter of respect, not only for tradition but for the Queen herself. She had made her decision with the authority and dignity that had defined her reign. To William, Harry's reaction felt impulsive, a misunderstanding of how things were done within the palace walls. Their once light-hearted conversations began to shift, turning tense. William tried to reason with Harry, his tone calm and measured. He explained the importance of respecting tradition, understanding the Queen's decisions, and recognizing the symbolism behind every royal gesture. But Harry, driven by his fierce loyalty to Meghan, refused to be swayed. His frustration flared in their discussions, his tone growing sharper, his words more laden with resentment. For William, it felt like speaking to a stranger, someone driven, not by reason, but by raw emotion. The foundation of their relationship, once the bedrock of their lives, began to crack. William turned to close friends and palace aides, voicing his concerns over Harry's increasing discontent. "He doesn't get it," he reportedly confided to a confidant. "He thinks it's about the tiara, but it's so much bigger than that. It's about respecting the way things are done. It's about family." His words, spoken with a sense of responsibility, carried an undertone of helplessness. William, despite his steady composure and loyalty to tradition, found himself unable to bridge the growing gap between them. Behind closed doors, the strain was undeniable. William, who had spent his life preparing for his future role as king, found himself torn between duty and family. He wanted to protect Harry, as he always had, but the rift between them was undeniable. Harry's defiance of tradition, his willingness to challenge the Queen's decisions, left William feeling isolated. They had always faced the world together, two brothers against the weight of expectation. But now, for the first time, William felt truly alone. As the wedding drew near, the tension intensified. Public appearances, once filled with shared smiles and silent understanding, now felt strained and distant. William, the picture of royal composure, continued to carry out his duties with the expected grace, but those close to him saw the toll it was taking. He grew quieter, more introspective, his eyes shadowed with unspoken concerns. Kate, ever the supportive wife, stood by his side, offering solace, but even she couldn't heal the widening rift between the brothers. In private, William voiced his frustrations with a candor rarely seen. He spoke of Harry's stubbornness, his refusal to see reason, and his insistence that Meghan's happiness took precedence over royal traditions. For William, it was a matter of principles. He had spent his life learning to balance personal desires with public duty, accepting that certain sacrifices were necessary to uphold the dignity of the crown. Harry's defiance to him felt like a betrayal, not just of tradition, but of the unity they had built following their mother's death. Conversations with the Queen only solidified William's view. He had always shared a special bond with her, marked by mutual respect and quiet understanding. She confided in him, expressing her concerns and disappointment over the growing divide. William listened, nodding in agreement, his resolve strengthening. To him, the monarchy was more than just a family. It was an institution, a symbol of continuity that transcended personal conflicts. Harry's refusal to accept the Queen's decisions felt like a direct threat to that stability. Yet, despite his frustration, William's heart ached for his brother. He remembered their late-night talks about their mother, the long walks through Kensington Palace's gardens, and the deep bond they had formed through shared loss. Harry had always been the more free-spirited one, the one who embraced life, without restraint. But now, that spirit had turned into defiance, and his joy had been replaced with frustration and tension. William, bound by his duty and loyalty to tradition, couldn't understand Harry's need to challenge what had always been. Their final conversation before the wedding was thick with unspoken words and lingering resentment. William, in a calm tone, tried once more to reason with his brother. "This isn't just about you, Harry," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his responsibilities. "It's about family. It's about what we represent." Harry's response was immediate, his voice laced with frustration. "And what about Meghan? Isn't she family too?" he shot back. William paused, a deep sorrow weighing on him. "Of course she is," he responded, his voice heavy. "But there are rules. There always have been." The conversation ended in silence, a growing divide between them now seemingly insurmountable. William watched as Harry walked away, shoulders set in resolve, his steps firm and unyielding. For William, it was a moment filled with profound sadness, an acknowledgement that the bond they once shared was now unraveling. His brother, the one he had always protected, was slipping away, drawn toward a life that felt at odds with the world they had known. As William returned to his royal duties, his public appearances were flawless, his demeanor unwavering. Yet beneath, the polished surface of royal life, the pain remained. He spoke less of Harry in private, his eyes heavy with regret and unspoken yearning. For William, the dispute over the tiara was not just a matter of tradition. It symbolized the widening rift tearing apart their family. The wedding day arrived, magnificent as expected. Meghan, radiant and graceful, walked down the aisle wearing the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, its diamonds sparkling beneath the chapel lights. William stood by Harry, maintaining his dignified composure, posture impeccable. Yet beneath the outward appearance of unity, the strain in their relationship was palpable, unspoken, but deeply felt. As the ceremony concluded and celebrations ensued, William watched his brother with mixed emotions, pride for his happiness, but sadness for the price it had cost. The happiness Harry had found was clear, but the cost of defying tradition was still a debt that had not yet been settled. For William, it marked the start of a journey he could not follow, one that led away from the unity they once shared and into an uncertain future. In Nottingham Cottage, the sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Outside, the gardens of Kensington Palace were lush and full of life, untouched by the tensions simmering inside the royal estate. Meghan Markle, now the Duchess of Sussex, sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the greenery beyond. Her expression was serene yet distant, but beneath it a storm was building, one that had been sparked the moment her tiara request was denied. The tiara incident, as it was now known in palace circles, was far more than a disagreement over jewelry. It was a symbol of inclusion, of being accepted into the royal family. Meghan had entered the vaults of Buckingham Palace with excitement, her heart set on the Vladimir tiara, its emeralds gleaming under the lights. To her, it represented elegance, history, and her place within the royal family, but the refusal, formal and rigid in its delivery, felt like a rejection, a message that she would always be seen as an outsider. Though she masked her frustration, in public it simmered just beneath the surface. Meghan had always been a woman of conviction, one who spoke her mind and fought for what she believed in. Her journey from Hollywood actress to Duchess had been fraught with challenges, all of which she had faced with grace and determination. But this was different. It wasn't just about the tiara. It was about acceptance and recognition within a family bound by tradition. Within the quiet walls of the cottage, Meghan's frustrations spilled over in private conversations with Harry. She questioned why something as trivial as a tiara could cause such a stir, baffled by the power tradition seemed to hold over their lives. To her, it was more than a decision. About jewelry, it was a reflection of the barriers she had been facing ever since their engagement had been announced. The British press had relentlessly scrutinized her, analyzing everything from her wardrobe to her gestures, and now, within the palace walls, she felt the weight of royal tradition and expectation bearing down on her. Harry, ever loyal, listened with clenched fists, his brow furrowed. He knew the constraints of royal life, the obligations that defied reason at times, but seeing Meghan's frustration stirred something deeper in him, a fierce desire to protect her, to shield her from the harshness of royal protocol. He spoke. Softly, offering reassurance. He promised that things would get better, that she would find her place in time. But Meghan, with her sharp intuition, knew it wasn't that simple. "It's not just about the tiara," she said one evening, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about being heard, about being seen as part of this family." Harry took her hand, his voice firm as he assured her, "You are part of this family." But Meghan knew that, despite his words, the realities of tradition would not be so easily overcome. The tiara was merely a symbol of the much larger issue, a barrier she was determined to break. As the wedding day drew closer, Meghan channeled her frustration into the preparations. The details had to be perfect, her vision clear, her sense of modernity reflected in every choice. The flowers, the music, the guest list, all meticulously curated. Yet even as she poured herself into the planning, the shadow of the tiara incident loomed over everything. The palace, always mindful of public perception, worked quickly to ease the tension. Carefully crafted press releases painted the decision as a matter of tradition rather than exclusion. Meghan would wear the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, a piece of royal history that sparkled with diamonds and elegance. Outwardly, the decision was celebrated as another embrace of tradition, a smooth integration into royal life. But behind closed doors, Meghan's frustration lingered. Those closest to her spoke of private conversations filled with disbelief and disappointment. For Meghan, the denial of her choice was not merely a misunderstanding, it was a sign of the institution's reluctance to change. She had joined the royal family with the hope of modernizing its image, infusing fresh perspectives into its age-old traditions. However, the tiara incident, though seemingly minor, became a symbol of a deeper struggle. It reminded her that true acceptance remained just out of reach. Her Hollywood friends reached out with words of encouragement, praising her strength and reminding her that she had overcome even greater obstacles in the past. But Meghan, now bound by the weight of royal expectations, felt increasingly isolated. She confided in Harry about her concerns, not only regarding the tiara but also about her place within the family. "I want to be part of it, truly part of it," she had told him softly one evening, her voice determined. "Not just accepted because I married you, but because I belong." Harry, frustrated with the palace's traditions, assured her that things would eventually change. He spoke of a future where they could carve their own path, where tradition would evolve to meet modern needs. Though his words were sincere, they did little to ease Meghan's anxieties. She had witnessed how the monarchy clung tightly to its customs and resisted change with steadfastness. To Meghan, the tiara incident wasn't merely a setback. It was a glimpse of the challenges that awaited her, but Meghan wasn't one to back down. She doubled her efforts in the days leading up to the wedding, ensuring that every detail reflected her own vision. If she couldn't wear the tiara she had chosen, then everything else had to be flawless. The dress, the entrance, the vows, all had to embody her spirit of independence and modernity. For Meghan, it wasn't about blindly adhering to tradition, it was about reshaping it. The media, ever vigilant, picked up on the tension surrounding her choice of tiara. Whispers of a rift began to circulate, speculating about disagreements behind palace doors. Meghan maintained her composure in public, her smile radiant, her posture regal. Yet those closest to her could detect the subtle flickers of disappointment. In her eyes, the slight hesitation in her movements. To Meghan, the tiara represented more than just jewelry. It symbolized the acceptance she longed for, but had yet to fully receive. When the wedding day arrived, it was everything one would expect of a royal event. Meghan, resplendent in her white gown, walked down the aisle of St. George's Chapel, her hair crowned with the Queen Mary diamond bandeau. Its diamonds sparkled beautifully under the chapel's lights, catching the morning sun. To the outside world, it was a perfect, graceful union of tradition and modernity. But for Meghan, it was bittersweet. She had entered the royal family with dreams of change, of modernizing tradition and finding a place where she belonged. Yet the refusal of her chosen tiara left a lasting mark, a reminder that the path forward might not be as smooth as she had envisioned. Nevertheless, Meghan held her head high, her smile unwavering. If tradition would not bend to her, she would find another way. To her, the tiara incident was not the end. It was the beginning of a renewed determination to redefine her role and challenge the boundaries set before her. As she stood beside Harry, her hand in his, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not be silenced or sidelined. If tradition would not accept her, she would forge her own path. The wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was a grand spectacle, viewed by millions around the world. St. George's Chapel, bathed in the soft glow of spring sunlight, gleamed with white roses and greenery. Meghan, radiant in her Givenchy gown, walked down the aisle with the Queen Mary diamond bandeau atop her perfectly styled hair. Outwardly, it was a seamless blend of modernity and tradition, a celebration of love that defied boundaries and expectations. Yet behind the smiles and flawless public display, the tension lingered. The tiara incident, though quickly swept under the royal rug, left a lingering mark, one that wouldn't easily fade. Inside the palace, hushed whispers of discontent echoed through the halls. The fracture, though small and hidden from public view, was widening. For Meghan, the aftermath of the tiara incident was a harsh reminder of the barriers she would continue to face. She had entered the royal family with the hope of breaking down walls and reimagining tradition. But the refusal of her tiara, seemingly trivial to outsiders, was a clear sign that some aspects of the monarchy would remain unchanged. To her, it was a symbol of exclusion. Despite her new title, she still felt like an outsider within the palace walls. Harry, ever loyal in his support, grew more vocal in defending Meghan. In private conversations with palace aides, he expressed his disbelief over the controversy sparked by something as simple as a tiara. To him, it was more than a denial. It felt like a rejection of Meghan, a reflection of the institution's unwillingness to fully embrace her. His usually calm demeanor began to crack, his frustration bubbling over in meetings. The tension between Harry and palace staff grew palpable, as they clashed over his insistence that Meghan be fully respected, not just as his wife but as a member of the royal family in her own right. Yet, the deeply entrenched traditions of the monarchy remained steadfast, resisting the change Harry and Meghan sought. The tiara incident had been only a glimpse into the rigidness of royal customs, and Harry's push for change was met with stiff resistance. William found himself torn between loyalty to his brother and his duty to the crown, facing an uncomfortable dilemma. He could empathize with Harry's frustration, having witnessed firsthand the intense media scrutiny Meghan endured, with every aspect of her life under a magnifying glass. Yet, he also understood the importance of preserving tradition and the delicate structure that upheld the monarchy. To him, Harry's stance seemed like a challenge to the very essence of the institution that had shaped their lives. The brothers' once strong bond began to show signs of strain as their conversations grew more strained, and disagreement replaced their usual closeness. William, always the peacemaker, tried to reason with Harry, explaining that tradition existed for a reason, and that the Queen's decision had been made not out of exclusion, but as a safeguard. However, Harry, unwavering in his loyalty to Meghan, could not be persuaded. He saw the Queen's decision as a personal affront to Meghan's place in the family, and his frustration only deepened with each discussion. What were once light-hearted exchanges between the brothers escalated into tense arguments, their voices rising behind closed doors, echoing throughout the palace and whispered by the staff. For the first time, the brothers found themselves on opposite sides of a divide neither was willing to bridge. The Queen, ever the symbol of calm and stability, watched the growing tension with quiet concern. She had made her decision regarding the tiara with the belief that it was necessary to uphold tradition and protect the dignity of the monarchy. But she had not anticipated the rift it would create between her grandsons. Once inseparable, the brothers now had differing visions of the future, with Harry pushing for change and Meghan's full acceptance into the family, which clashed with the monarchy's long-standing customs. The tension was felt not just within the family but also in the palace. Meghan, who had entered royal life with grace and poise, now faced the rigid expectations of an institution steeped in tradition. The staff, accustomed to the quiet dignity of Kate Middleton, struggled with Meghan's modern approach and her insistence on change. This tension manifested in reports of disagreements between Meghan and palace aides, who found themselves at odds over everything from public appearances to protocol. Meghan, having been used to managing her own image as an actress, bristled at the restrictions placed upon her. The carefully planned public appearances, the measured words, and the constant monitoring felt suffocating to her, a gilded cage disguised as tradition. Harry, ever the protector, became more defensive. His conversations with palace staff grew more pointed, and his demands for Meghan to feel respected and included became increasingly forceful. His frustration, once kept in private, began to show in public, with his expressions growing tenser and his interactions more clipped at royal events. To those who had known him since childhood, this marked a sharp contrast to the cheerful, easygoing prince he once was. Inside Buckingham Palace, staff members whispered about Harry's temper, Meghan's frustrations, and the growing divide between them. Some sympathized with Meghan, understanding her desire to modernize the institution and bring fresh perspectives. Others saw her insistence as a misunderstanding of the monarchy's deeply rooted traditions. Meanwhile, the Queen, though publicly silent, was privately concerned. Behind closed doors, meetings were held, discussing how to manage the rift before it became more visible. The monarchy's image was everything, and the cracks in the foundation couldn't be allowed to widen further. Despite the strain, Meghan maintained her composure in public, always with a radiant smile and poised appearance. But those closest to her could see the toll it was taking. the shadow of disappointment that flickered in her eyes when the cameras were off. To Meghan, the tiara incident was more than just a matter of tradition. It was a reflection of the challenges she would face in finding her place within the royal family. Though the divide was carefully concealed, it was clear to those who watched closely. Once seen as symbols of modernity within the monarchy, Harry and Meghan now found themselves at odds with the very institution they had once embraced. The whispers of conflict grew louder, and the tension was more palpable than ever. For those watching from the sidelines, the question remained: was this simply a clash between tradition and modernity, or the beginning of a much deeper fracture, one that could one day reshape the British monarchy itself?